Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. Today I want to talk to you about cube rooms. Oh no! But before I get into that, just quickly, if you want to get the most out of your room and speakers, and you want to know the exact steps that I take to treat a room and to get it to translate, make sure you download my home studio treatment framework at the link in the description. It's the exact steps that I use to treat rooms that build on one another, so to make sure that you're not turning in circles, that you make sure you get everything out of each of those steps that you take to treat your room. So setting up your listening position, setting up your speakers, planning your treatment, using a sub, using measurements, using resonance absorbers, speaker decoupling. It's all in there, laid out nicely for you to follow step by step to make sure that you get everything out of your room and speakers and get your mixes to translate as best as possible from the space that you've got. So again, make sure you download my home studio treatment framework at the link in the description. Now, let's talk about cube rooms. This is something that pops up all the time. It's a big no-no, apparently. It's the biggest disaster in the world if the only thing you've got is a cube room where the width and the length are the same, possibly the height even as well. It's the biggest disaster, impossible to work with. Or is it? I don't think so. In the end, a cube room really is a room just like any other. If you go through the steps that it takes to set up in any room that was never built for that purpose, you can get results. But there are some things to watch out for. One thing in particular that has direct consequences about what you can and can't do in a cube room in order to get a functional setup. So let's start right at the most important point, and that is that you can't place your listening position in the center of the room. Or rather, when you test for your listening position, you have to make sure that you don't end up sitting in the middle of the room. So why is that? Well, the thing is, it's all about standing waves room modes, right? And these build up between parallel surfaces in your room. It's basically when the wavelength of a certain sound wave fits exactly between two parallel surfaces. And if all the distances between the walls in your room, so the front and back and this left to right and the floor and ceiling, if they're all the same, it's exactly the same wavelengths that will fit in between those surfaces, building or creating standing waves or room modes at the exact same frequencies, and they'll all pile up on top of each other. We can see this if we look at the AmRock room mode calculator. So if I just punch in some dimensions that match exactly, and I'm not actually gonna match the height because that doesn't usually tend to be the case, but if we just go for something like this, which is roughly 12 by 12 feet by, well, maybe 14 by 14 feet by 12 feet ceiling height, what happens is that the room modes that build up all sit at the exact same frequency. We can't tell it yet with this lowest one here, but if we move up, okay, there's nothing, no pile up on that one either. On the next one, nope. But here we go. Here's the first pile up. So it's hardly visible in this graph, but if we kind of move the cursor across this little block here, we can see that there are two main room modes which sit right on top of each other. And that will mean they will accentuate each other both in cancellation and in accentuation, so in boosts of energy. And the same thing happens here at this one at 85, 86 hertz, as you can see. And that's the main problem, right? That these standing waves end up sitting right on top of each other, creating massive peaks and dips in the frequency response at basically all positions in the room. But the worst is always going to be in the center, in the middle of the room, because that means that both for the front to back room mode and the side to side room mode, you'll be sitting in either a cancellation or a summation node giving you a very, very poor low-end frequency response. The only way to get out of this is to move your listening position out of the middle of the room. And if you go through the bass hunter technique that I teach in order to find your listening position, you'll realize this as well. Now, this has some direct consequences, though, that most people aren't aware of and that you need to respect in order to make this work. And if I just jump over to this Amray ray tracing model, let me see if I can zoom in a bit, get this slightly centered. Here we go. Even further. So we've got our square room here. And once we move our listening position from the middle closer to one of the walls, we'll get out of that potential zone where the room modes pile up in a negative way, in the most negative way. We can to some extent even this out. What that means, though, is that you will have very limited space to the front wall. And that, in consequence, means that when you set up your speakers, you will, by definition, have a very, very small stereo triangle. Your listening setup in a cube room, any small room for that matter, is going to be very small. That's the only way you can make it work, with the listening position being in a place in the room of balance in the low end, and the speakers not forcing you to push that listening position further back again, okay? So that has some additional consequences on top of what I just said, which is, first of all, you're going to have to use a very small desk because you need to sit so close to the front wall, potentially within 2-3 feet. And there is just no way to then put in something like this big Argosy desk that I have here, which forces you to push away from the front wall, because that means sacrificing your ideal listening position and moving you closer to the middle of the room again, okay? Same with bigger speakers. Now, if you've watched my last videos, you know that I always say, find your listening position, and then for the space available, get the biggest speaker you can. Now, in this scenario, when you're so close, you have very limited space. So you're going to have to work with a small speaker. Something like the Neumann KH120 works really well for this purpose. It's a very compact size monitor that gives much bigger sound than you would expect for that size. And it gives you the flexibility to create that small stereo triangle and actually still get great sound from the speakers. Okay, so this is what you need to keep in mind in a cube room, but any small room, that in order to get a balanced low end, you need to move much closer to the front wall than you're probably comfortable with. But the bass hunter technique will reveal that for you. And once you've found that position, don't sacrifice it by just arbitrarily choosing a desk that is way too big, or speakers that are physically way too big to fit in the available space. Okay, if you sacrifice your listening position in this cube room scenario, you're done. You've lost. There is no way around it. You can't compensate for that mismatch, that poorly chosen listening position with treatment, for example, because usually these rooms are small. Like I said, 12 by 12 feet is a kind of a standard size, right? And there just isn't that much space for treatment. So you need to make sure that you pull that lever that positioning gives you as far as you can in order to then potentially build on that with treatment. Yeah, but that is your biggest win. If you don't do that, you're done. You've lost. Okay? So again, make sure in a cube room to find your listening position and not be surprised if it is very, very close to the front wall, within 2-3 feet. And just accept that that means you will have to use a very small desk and very small speakers in order to make it work. If you do that, you can totally make it work. If you don't, you're compromising on your potentially biggest win on getting good sound, and chances are that you will have drastic changes in the frequency response that you can't really compensate for with any other means. Okay? So, simple enough, I hope. Don't freak out if you're working in a cubed room, okay? It is totally possible. You just have to accept the consequences this has for your listening position and speaker and desk size, and just go with it. And if you do that, you can totally make it work. Okay, once again, to wrap up, if you want to figure out how you can get the most out of your room and speakers, be it a cubed room, just a standard shoebox-shaped room, any asymmetrical shape, I've collected the steps that I go through to treat rooms like these, home studios, DIY studios, in my home studio treatment framework. Make sure you download it at the link in the description, follow the steps, implement them as best as possible in your room, and I can guarantee that is the best, most scientifically proven way in order to get results from your home studio. All right, see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.